Welcome to One Man's Tracks, the second-hand music channel. This week, I'm pleased and feel fortunate to have finally discovered Mike Muir. His various punk and metal stylings and his think for yourself message has me hooked in and excited to learn more. Born in LA in 1963, it's his brother, Dogtown skate legend Jim Muir, who hooked him in with bands like Black Sabbath and UFO, getting him into the heavier strain of sounds. A car accident in 1979 caused Mike to drop out of high school early at age 16. He moved in with his brother. They gathered a drum set, some guitars, and started putting on rent shows with the first iteration of what would become his band, the Suicidal Tendencies. Growing beyond being just a party band, they would record some demos in '82, and in 1983 they would sign with independent label Frontier Records to release their self-titled hardcore punk debut. Although it quickly became an underground classic, it still took the band 4 years to release more new material. During this time, Mike and bassist Luigi Maiocca formed the label Suicidal Records, as well as a short-lived band called Los Cycos. The band's second album, Join the Army, would be the first to feature R.J. Herrera on drums, as well as lead guitarist Rocky George, who would bring in some more robust metallic tones. Maiocca would eventually be replaced by Bob Heathcote, and for a brief period, Mike sang for the band No Mercy. From there, he would recruit rhythm guitarist Mike Clark to help record and write some songs for their upcoming major label debut through Epic Records in 1988. How Will I Laugh Tomorrow If I Can't Even Smile Today? Just before the summer European tour with Anthrax in '89, Heathcote left the band and Rocky would introduce them to a soon-to-be funk metal-based legend in Robert Trujillo. Touring with them later that year, they would release their fourth studio album that some considered to be just kind of a compilation, 2 EPs jammed together called Controlled by Hatred / Feel Like Shit ... Deja Vu. A bit of a mouthful, and this was before Trujillo was officially a certified member, and so Mike Clark and Rocky George shared bass duties on that, and that turned out to be their first gold certified album. He would become a member and get his chance to contribute on the band's 5th album, as well as his and Mike's funky and free side project called the Infectious Grooves. Another band I'd love to find and have an excuse to talk more about them, but hey, today is all about the Suicidal Tendencies and the Infectious tracks on this. The band's third through Epic Records, released in July of 1990, produced by ST and Mark Dobson. This is their second gold certified and near breakthrough record. Lights, camera, revolution. The band sounds so solid and certain with each delivery, evolving more towards the progressive and experimental side of thrash, with tracks exceeding 5 minutes full of all sorts of sonic shifts. While the Suicidal Tendencies have always been rich in texture, here they've reached new melodic depths, and the range that they attempt and pull off just shows off this band's incredible diversity. This formidable fivesome found their stride and proved that their ambitions were too strong to be held down. Having been banned from performing in LA due to some overly destructive fans and some general just bias due to, I think, their provocative namesake, they managed to get just too big, too popular, to the point where they couldn't be not accommodated by these venues, and so this is the album that enabled them to go beyond the stigma, the bullshit rumors, and the misunderstandings, and allow them to return to play in their home state. This CD's 43 minutes and 10 tracks are certainly tough to deny, with its clear production, introspective themes, loud rockin' riffs, and its steady grooving drumming. LCR contains a gripping array of these memorable melodic metal tracks that just take off and only give you the occasional transition to catch your breath. very little filler here. It's just such a blast, and its progressive crossover style has helped influence a ton of artists and create a whole wave of heavy headbanging tunes throughout the 90s. It's such a fun and engaged listen that really starts off so strong with the ferocious first cut. It's the suicidal classic, "You Can't Bring Me Down!" There's a theatrical build that brings you into this relentless and self-assured ripper with a little bit of something for everyone here, from its catchy punk chorus to its choice metal guitar solo to the impassioned and aggressive outbursts. There's even a little indie rock breakdown here that all comes together on this Sui staple. Then another epic intro sets the tone for the darker and sludgier Lost Again. It's a bit nightmarish, really, about losing a fight with reality, or maybe losing yourself in reality. Again, it goes through multiple phases, this time becoming increasingly frantic as it progresses and increasingly exciting as well. Alone comes a bit out of left field with a far softer approach than the usual thrashy tendencies, at least initially, with its intro drifting fairly close to being a rock ballad before this one kind of morphs into a lonely, slower, but fairly future-focused skate metal number that it feels like a strange confluence of emotions and ideas, but it sometimes works. I like the song and its sentiment, but I do feel like the phases aren't quite as cohesive as the previous tracks, and it makes it a little tougher to stick with. Now, the funky, cheeky take on a genre I might call glam punk with the song Lovely is one that I could see as possibly divisive for some listeners, but I'm all for this one's aloof and accented lyrical delivery. I feel like for those who might not enjoy it as much, the little flip of the script right at the end is just the touch of realness it needed as an exclamation of this track's true agenda. Sitting near the center of this record is a more standard heavy metal track called Give It Revolution. I say more standard in the sense of its style and progression, and not at all in its originality, because this one goes off. It's fully loaded, melodic, has a fantastic mix, and delivers this profound sensation. Get Whacked has an odd orchestral intro that I'm still a little bit confused by, and then the rest of the track is kind of forgettable thrash about needing to go psycho, get out of your own head, and how people are gonna react to that. Again, isolating, and again, a case where I connect a little bit more with the sentiment of the track than its delivery. Now, this CD's second single is the only one they saw chart in the UK. Send Me Your Money has unfortunately retained its relevance now for nearly 40 years, with this track being performed at shows in 1985. It's a clever cut about preachers taking advantage of their congregations and spending their money on luxurious frivolities. Its main guitar riff is borrowed from a track off their eponymous debut, and it's got a couple of little bass solos that allow Trujillo's funk to take a more driving force. It's definitely a highlight on the track list, and it does so well to elevate as well as take the pressure off the whole back end of the project. Emotion number 13 sees Muir reiterating his experiences with feeling mentally unstable, having some of this record's most compelling lines on it. Then we have a quick and heavy track called Disco's Out, Murders In that just wails in on its brutal thrashy headline to bring us onto the phenomenal closing number, Go and Break Down, ending with a rowdy song that has some pieces that remind me a lot of elements of Alice Cooper, Judas Priest, and Led Zeppelin. This awesome classic amalgamation all put together with this punk rock attitude that just leaves me wanting more head-banging tunes. And thankfully, these guys have put out more than a few songs to keep my neck sore for months. From this, they'd further expand their horizons with their highest charting album, The Art of Rebellion. It didn't feature drummer RJ Herrera on it, and I feel like it's pretty out there for Sui standards. They do still manage to hold on to those thrashy roots, and they would return to those after they failed to acquire the masters for their eponymous debut, releasing Still Cyco after all these years, a re-recording of that debut album with this lineup. Actually, it was recorded while they were putting this together or just after, and so RJ's still on that one. And I know it's probably a controversial opinion, and maybe I've just really connected with this lineup the most, but I do prefer Still Cyco over that raw, more hardcore Suicidal Tendencies debut. And I know it's going to piss off some old school fans, and I'd love for you to tell me why I'm wrong down in the comments, but it's just my opinion. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Following those releases, in a move of seemingly self-sabotage, in June of 1994, the band would come out with their 8th album, Suicidal For Life, and it would see Muir giving a giant middle finger to both the record industry as well as his new fans with the immature, kind of in-your-face and frankly uninspired album. It would be the end of his contract with Epic Records, as well as the last album to feature both Rocky and Robert, and that might be the one reason why I don't totally hate it as much as this album is responsible for all those great losses. Breaking up, Mike Muir would release a solo album, Trujillo would go and play with Ozzy, Rocky would play with the Cro-Mags, but Muir and Clark weren't done with the Suicidal Tendencies just yet, reforming about a year after they first broke up with another new lineup, releasing Freedom in 1999 and Free Your Soul, Save My Mind in 2000 through Suicidal Records. From then, outside of another album of re-recordings and I think a compilation album, there would be no new Suicidal Tendencies music for 13 years until 2013 with their pretty unreal LP, 13. They've had so many lineup changes, I struggle to keep up. I think even Thundercat played bass with them for a minute. As of 2016, though, they've had the same lineup with Dean Pleasance on guitar, Jeff Pogan as rhythm guitarist, Dave Lombardo on the drums, and Rod Diaz on the bass. There's, of course, no ST without the main man, Cyco, Miko, Mike Muir as well, rounding out the 5-piece that is now the current Suicidal Tendencies. They released a EP and a full-length album in 2018. The album is a re-recording of Cyco Miko's debut album called Still Cycopunk after all these years. Those are pretty dope and worth checking out. Try out the new lineup, guys, if you haven't had the chance. Trujillo's son actually fills in for Diaz on the bass while they're touring sometimes, which is totally wild. His name's Ty, and Trujillo himself plays for a little band called Metallica. He's the longest tenured bassist they've ever had, and I guess I'll mention as well for this massive run-on sentence that Rocky played with Fishbone for quite a while before they reformed their original lineup. Whew, these guys are quite the band with quite the history. Thank you to anyone who stuck it out to the end here. Please leave me a comment about your memories and thoughts on this band and this album. If it's new to you, listen to it down in the description. All the links to anything I talked about down below. Like and subscribe for next week's secondhand band. We're getting into Tone Loc. Thanks for watching, guys. Now send me your money.